Okay, session is being recorded. Good. Greetings. Welcome to the Transforming Assessment webinar series. This is a re-recording from the webinar from the 17th of July 2019, and this is the assessment in higher education post-panel conference session. And I'll hand over to Sally Jordan, who will progress this session.
Thank you, Matthew, and good morning, everybody, from a very sunny England, a sunny morning. So I'm talking about I'm going to just give a brief introduction to the what happened at the International Assessment Higher Education Conference in June 2019, just to give an overview. So the presentation, the conference it's a big conference, as you can see at the bottom. We attract 220 delegates from all over the world. And there are a number of different activities. This year we had 2 keynote presentations. We started with 6 masterclasses, and then there was a really, really wide-ranging series of presentations as included there. Just say a little bit about what was in the 2 keynotes. So they were really contrasting. First of all, we had Bruce Macfarlane. His title was Assessment, Student Performativity and the Freedom to Learn. And he was basically talking to the theme that a lot of what we do in the name of teaching and learning, and particularly in the name of assessment, is undermining of students' rights, because we're rewarding that what he describes as performativity, essentially doing what you're told to do, and punishing non-compliance, and that damages student freedom. And he talked under the themes of bodily performativity, which is basically things like being there, making attendance compulsory. He also talked about participative performativity, by which he meant essentially assessing grades, giving grades for contributing in class. And there was a lovely quote from that bit, which is that people can actually be learning when you don't know that they're learning. So the quote is, beware that reading a book on a desert island can be active learning. If answering in class, you may be doing it just to be seen. And the final thing was, his final theme was around emotional performativity, which is things that we do, like insisting on students having reflective diaries. So that was the first keynote. In the second keynote, it was Phil Dawson, and this was around the issues of what do we do about what he would call student cheating. We use words like plagiarism, but let's call it cheating. And he basically said that if we think that we are dealing with the issues with that at the moment, then we're fooling ourselves. But that we can perfect isn't possible, but better is. So some of the reasons why students cheat are the obvious ones. Basically, where people are struggling, they will cheat their way out of it, and there are some fairly obvious things that we can do about it. But basically, we need more evidence, and I love the final bit that we'll cheat to get it. So those were the 2 keynotes. We had a number of conference themes, and the presentations were around those themes. And I have led over the years on the theme that's now called Integrating Digital Tools and Technologies for Assessment. But not all of the presentations that I would classify under those themes that are classified as talking about the use of technology enhancement, they don't always sit within that one theme, because obviously we're using technology in all sorts of ways. So what I wanted to do in picking the people to talk for today's presentation was to enable us to think more generally about what makes technology enhancement effective, and actually as a kind of sideline to that, what doesn't work. So rather than this just being about me talking, I'm going to hand over in a few minutes to two other speakers, and we're going to hear from two of the contrasting presentations from the conference about both of examples that you might describe as technology enhanced assessment. And the two speakers are Mira Vogel from King's College London, who's going to speak about students and assessors in conversation about authentic multimodal assessment. And then we're going to hear from Rosaria Marsico from the University of Exeter, who will talk about online tools to enhance students' assessment experience. So first of all, Mira, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Sally. Hello, everyone. I'm Mira, and although I work at King's College now, I'm going to talk about some work that I did when I was a digital education advisor at UCL. And oops, I think I've just over-clicked. UCL has a research-based education framework called the Connected Curriculum, and it was offering some fellowships to inquire into different aspects of it. And I put in a successful proposal around this aspect that I've highlighted here, which is students learn to produce outputs, assessments directed at an audience. And I had three main questions, which I'll unpack a little bit later on. The first was, what kinds of authentic assessed work are students producing at UCL and using which media? How are students supported to conceptualise these audiences to which they're outward facing? And then what approaches are taking to assessing this new and often very diverse kind of work? And I just want to take the opportunity to thank Dilly Fung, who was at the time heading up the UCL Arena Centre, and Brent Carnell, and they both looked after the project so well. It was a great opportunity, and a special thanks as well to the participants, the staff and students who you'll see named in the report. So first of all, what do I mean here by authentic? Because there are many different angles on authentic. I just want to pick out three. The first is that students engage with the course material deeply and preferably personally, and they work the ideas, work with them and express them in their own ways and find their own voice. The second is that they think like researchers and professionals in their discipline. So this is thinking beyond the context of the course and also beyond the context of the course. They produce work that might have value beyond the end of the course rather than just being intended for one or two assessors. And on the right hand side, what do we mean by multimodal? I have some examples here of the kinds of work that I was looking at in this project. And you'll see websites that bring together different forms of media in different voices. They might be explainer videos, they might be blogs, they might be online galleries. And why would we want to make room for the digital and the multimodal in assessment? So just to make the case, on the right hand side we have the New London group, who were a very prescient group of educational researchers and theorists who came together in Connecticut to discuss what they thought of as the implications of emerging networked digital life. One of the things they picked out was the potential for students to become full social participants and what that implied for different ways of expressing themselves. Again, the New London group, also they understood that there was an emancipatory potential, and I think they were very prescient here given all that we know about how the web can be used to shape people's political positions. And they were absolutely adamant that being able to master representational forms was going to be very important for social participation. moving on to the idea of non-disposable assessments. This, I think that was coined by David Wiley in 2013, and he was talking about the kinds of, he wanted to see an end to the kind of assignments that students complain about doing, faculty complain about grading, and probably professional services colleagues complain about having to store as well and get rid of at the end of the data retention period. And Serafin and colleagues this year began to bring together a framework for the kinds of assessments that outlast a course. And then finally, I think this is Gareth Davis addressing a gathering of educators interested in the civic university, and he is sounding a warning note here. He's saying that students may still be coming, but the purposes of why they're coming is not necessarily clear, and he wants universities to send a clear message about how they can be a public good. So moving on to methods, it was really hard to come up with methods for this. Staff and students are very busy. I wanted to make participation worthwhile. Assessment can be really emotional and occasionally litigious, so that's quite inhibiting. But at the same time, looking at this kind of work, it was going to be impossible to guarantee anonymity and also talk about the work with any degree of specificity. So what I ended up doing is recruiting pairs, or where there was group work, threes of students and assessors to come together and have a relaxed dialogue over the students' work, generated prompts, question prompts from the literature. The conversations were videoed, I transcribed them, I analysed them thematically, and then I took those themes and I cut the videos into the report, and the report takes the theme of a series of videos. And here are the participants at a glance from across different departments at UCL. And here were the questions. For the students, they were about what they thought the purposes of the assignment were, the first impression of the assignment, did it seem academic, how did they know how to succeed, what about the audience, and how did the idea of the audience influence the work? Which parts were most straightforward or challenging, and what did they find most valuable? And there were corresponding questions for staff. And themes from the dialogues now, I'll just pick out a few that correspond with the questions that I raised at the beginning. This idea that maybe academics sits a little bit awkwardly with multimodal. With these staff and students pairs, and I should say these were the successful ones, so we have a very positive picture here, but students do need to know why they're asked to produce new kinds of work, especially if they're used to succeeding on the strength of their essays or their tests. They may need reminding to bring academic standards to what they might be used to thinking of as informal modes of communications, the blog, social media, video. Multimodal can stimulate fresh academic perspectives, and anyone familiar with Mayer and Land's work on threshold concepts know the value of students being able to really work with ideas and turn them into what they call remediation. New perspectives liberate students, and assessors often find this quite infectious. They're exhilarated too. And then students can work with academic ideas in ways that feel authentic. Another theme, audiences bring pride and attention. Suddenly, students have an audience in mind. They're making an effort with first impressions and engaging an audience that maybe doesn't have to look at their work the way established kind of forms of assessors do. Student networks bring wider attention when students are proud enough to show their work, and there's this virtuous circle of effort and pride and attention. And all this, even though currently one of the things I found out was that audiences are mostly notional, because it's quite hard to build real audiences for for this work. So they're notional, they're thought about, but they're often rarely defined in detail. Assessing diverse work, it can be very challenging for assessors, but also very, very enjoyable. And assessors need to know and realise and read through students' work that may fall short of their vision, because students are trying to often master expressing themselves with new kinds of technology or unfamiliar kinds. So assessors learn to discern effort and purpose and achievement, and they tend to emphasize communication more than technical skills. Which brings some dilemmas sometimes, because technical skills and good technical choices are something that is widely recognised as being a very positive ability for students to have. And at the moment, to some extent, assessment criteria are not really necessarily acknowledging this. There is a worry about equity and students being on an even playing field when they embark on the work. So that's still to be settled. I'll leave you to watch this because it doesn't translate so well in Blackboard Collaborate. So I'll just draw to a close now with, if you want to listen to the short videos and watch them and see background to the project, I have some links here. I also have gathered together some resources, including a gallery of student work. It's all public access and consent has been given. I also have some tools that people can refer students to, which are a lot of them free and open source. And then also the end one is a way of seeking consent from students to show or publish or open their work if they want to do that, make it outward facing. And there's some references. Thank you very much for listening. Please keep in touch.
Thanks ever so much, Mira. That's great. And before we move on, I've actually just got a question. You're familiar with the sort of notion of sustainable assessment. In a sense, that was what you were talking about, wasn't it? If this works, it's an assessment that goes beyond. It becomes something that goes beyond the duration of the
yes.
piece of work in mind.
Yes, that's bad, isn't it? Yeah. It's,
yeah.
Yes, it definitely is. That has that idea of making this work more meaningful and more relevant, wider than the institution. So yeah.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned that the students that you'd got there who were, you used the word, these were the successful pairs at the interviews. Do you have any feel for whether this sort of assessment will give a means for students who maybe aren't so good at more conventional assessed tasks? You know, whether there are people who would be successful at one and not successful at the other. And I'm trying to think of somebody who was talking quite a lot relatively recently about, you know, almost giving students choice of what they do in the name of assessment.
Yeah, I think assessment choice is it's really helpful if we're thinking about assessment for learning, and giving students a way of expressing themselves in different forms. And I think some of the multimodal approaches that you'd see in the reports, so for example small little websites, they and blogs, actually they really do give students the leeway to kind of major on either the text, the typographic kind of verbal text, or the spoken word, or videos. So there's maybe scope for co-producing assessment tasks that allow for that. I also think there's something in encouraging students to experiment with assessments. Become quite a risk-averse area, because especially in the UK, because the stakes are so high now. And I mean, there's a role for formative assessment there, of course, but you know, allowing students or encouraging them to try different forms, because they may find one that really suits them. And one thing I didn't talk about was the power of peers here. So where there's group work, or maybe where there's peer review, that can be incredibly helpful because peers sustain each other, and often in groups groups will try something that's more ambitious than they might have tried alone, and they pool skills, and they help each other reach a goal. So yeah, I think I'd say these just what I was just going to say, that these are the successful students, but I think all of these colleagues had found that the assessment overall was a very big success, and this kind of practice is definitely spreading.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's lovely. Thanks ever so much, Mira. I mean, I found it interesting. I mean, a lot of there's two things in there. There's the assessment itself, but also obviously the methodology that you've used. So thanks very much indeed. And
Thanks.
I'm going to hand over now to Maria Rosaria for the second presentation. Hello.
Hi, Maria. You need to press the microphone button down the center of the screen towards the bottom, hopefully. I think I know what's happened. Maria might have lost the connection and it's saying joining.
Okay, she'll probably be back in a moment.
Yeah. Let me see if I can pause the recording. No, I can't. Okay.
She's back in.
Yeah. Okay. For some reason that
everyone.
a presenter. Hi,
Okay,
Maria.
hi,
Can you
everyone.
hear us? Yeah. I'm just.
Right. So yeah. I am Maria Rosaria Marsico, and I am a senior lecturer in structural engineering, as well as director of education in engineering at the University of Exeter. And today I'm going to talk about online tools to enhance student experience. And in particular, I will focus on assessment and feedback. So the engineering is part of a college of engineering, mathematics, and physical sciences, which in the last 5 years faced a sort of a significant increment of the number of students. In 2011, when I started this job, I taught to a class of 30 students, and now the classes are about with under 50, 200 students. The second essential point is that in 2017, the National Student Survey in the area of assessment and feedback show a significant low score. So as director of education, I needed to take actions to address this. To offer students a good feedback, comprehensive, on time, and make sure that all 200 students receive this feedback and engage with it. We all know that feedback could facilitate interaction between students and teaching materials, and could also contribute to student development and retention. But as academics, we know that feedback is time consuming. The sort of feedback that I wanted to offer to students meets essentially the 11 principles, which I believe all are familiar with, which make the feedback comprehensive and essential to support student learning. And in particular, I focused on 4 points: sufficient feedback in terms of frequency and detail provided in the feedback, timely feedback. We at the University of Exeter, we have restrictions of provided feedback in 3 weeks, which could be a challenge for a class of 200 students or more. It could be provided, well, should be provided in such a way that students can engage with it, and also should be useful for students for future learning. Technology came to help me, and I decided to go for technologies, as it is now an essential theme of the higher education academies, and also is a part of the new education strategies, and in particular addresses the two themes of the University of Exeter, which are learning reimagined and digital transformation. The University of Exeter has a Moodle system and has a virtual learning environment with a number of tools that could be used to design online assessments. In particular, it has a quiz, which were something similar to what I wanted to do, but not exactly what I wanted from online assessment and feedback. It also has some other tools like question mark perception or similar, but the limitations that I found in those tools are that they require programming skills for setting advanced engineering questions, and also sometimes they require VPN for advanced settings, but the key point was that I didn't want to depend on a specific learning, a specific technology. So I wanted to do something which gives me the flexibility of editing and being used in almost any environment. This is the case studies where I'm going to show you the tool that I have developed and possible applications in other environments. I decided to use this tool in a 3rd year engineering module. It's a compulsory module. It is called computer-aided design, and is taken by about 200 students. And I wanted to offer students individual feedback, targeted and comprehensive, so provided in such way that the students can engage with it, suggesting learning resources with images, examples, videos, links, and some reflections on tutorials, and possibly giving, pointing out significant elements of the course materials that students need to engage with. Because it is an online assessment and also provide online feedback, I decided to create a practice assessment which aimed to reduce anxiety by allowing students to practice and familiarize with the system, and reduce those anxiety when they will be performing the the summative assessment. The tool is based on Office tools, and it has a main question bank which is online, which collects student answers. Those are going to be summarized, well, to be collected in a spreadsheet which is generated automatically, and then the spreadsheet contains the feedback, and using mail matching, students will receive individual feedback. To give an example, there is a bit of descriptions of the assessment, and only 2 questions, compulsory questions for students, are their email address at the university one, because they will receive the feedback via email, and then the digital the candidate number, which will guarantee anonymousness of the response. Then students can navigate back and forward and answer the questions, or answer no question at all, and submit their piece of assessment. An example of what I did ask the students, the students have to draw a phone. I gave them instructions. They have to calculate the volume of this phone, and then I give them information to the dimension, sizes, and possible tools that they can use to draw their 3D model, and then to make sure that they do the task and minimizing cheating, they have to submit the final drawing, and so in this case they have to submit 7 different drawings of 7 objects. This is sort of feedback that students receive. So there is, of course, the final score, and based on their answers, and then a general feedback which address the main points about ability of drawing, and include also some key links that students can visualize, can go and visualize and improve their drawing skills. But in addition to this general feedback, students will receive feedback for each question. They could, and mark for each question. So they know exactly how marks are calculated, but also they can link the mark with the feedback. For this particular case, question 2, the answer of the student answer was very far away from the correct one, and away the tolerance area, so they essentially got 0 mark, and they received feedback which helped them and gave instruction on how to improve and how to use the drawing tools and perform better the next task. But the powerful of this tool, which I have developed, is that for answers which are in the tolerance range, students will receive partial mark, and will receive also specific feedback which address specific points which students should review and improve. So in this particular case, for question 6, this student received 5 marks out of 10 and received specific feedback. Then this tool allowed the use of pictures, instructions on how to use drawing software or some drawing tools, and also we can add links, we can add particular resources, a screenshot, and so on. So the feedback then at the end becomes very comprehensive and could be used for future learning. Now, as Director of Education, I also decided to check assessment and feedback for each engineering module at the University of Exeter, and engage with lecturers if the feedback was not comprehensive, asking for improvement. Those two actions, the introduction of online assessments and checking feedback and assessment, overall the discipline ended up in a very positive NSS score in 2018. And in particular, we can see here that there was a significant improvement of the NSS score in the area of assessment and feedback of about 11%. The tool that I have developed has been used by other colleagues in teaching second-year modules, and students are very enthusiastic about this online assessment and receiving feedback by email, so they can read the feedback and engage with it in their own time. It proved to be a good way to improve NSS score and also assist students to support their learning. It fits pretty well with the AHE and University of Exeter education strategies, and it has been tested by in other disciplines, in mathematics and medicine, and colleagues from medicines are interested in implementing this tool and also in gamifying this automatic feedback software. The tool is free, so I'm happy to share with you if you are interested. Feel free to contact me, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thanks very much, Maria Rosaria. It's very, very interesting. Again, just a couple of thoughts. Do you have any? So on each, you're giving feedback to students on each individual question and overall. Do you have any feel for which bits of it is that the students are finding particularly useful? Is it the feedback on the individual questions, or is it that overall feedback?
Right. So we all know that students are more interested in the score, especially if they are third-year students, and they need the final grade. Yes. But because this was a module delivered in term 1, students found very useful the specific feedback for each question, because they found instructions on how to use tools or links or videos, images that they can use for future assessment. So they had a similar assessment in other modules, which required use of the drawing tool, and they found useful to go back to this feedback, which was provided by email, so they could easily find the feedback, and then go to that particular tool and practice a bit and perform the next task in the following term. So I would say more individual feedback for each question, because it's very comprehensive, and I found useful for future tasks.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think both of those, as you say, if you come back to the Gibson-Simpson conditions, that both of those, in a way, what you're saying is that in order for the feedback to be useful, the students need to be able to use it. It's that getting it quickly and then being able to use it in either doing a similar task or just in general going forward. That's really great, Maria Rosaria. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
As we pull towards the end of the presentation, the recording, I'm going to just start by reflecting on some of the discussion that we had after the webinar. And basically, we're talking about the question I raised at the beginning was, what is it, what can work, what can make technology enhancement effective? Now, as I hope has been clear from the two talks that we've had, actually there's an awful lot that can be included in technology enhanced assessment, and I'm just going to reflect on that just a little bit more. So I'm going to start by going from my own experience. So as some of you know, Matthew introduced me as very much in the context of the Assessment in Higher Education conference and network, where I'm a member of the executive committee. But in my own work, I work for the UK Open University, and I hate to admit that I've been involved in technology enhanced assessment for about 20 years now. And at the Open University, we're currently global maintainers of the Moodle quiz engine, and I was the first person back in 2000 to introduce what we call ICMAs, interactive computer marked assignments, into my teaching. I'm a teacher. I'm not a technical expert at all, and basically, our emphasis has always been very much the sorts of things that Maria Rosaria was talking about. It's always been about giving students a lot feedback, specific feedback to the errors that they've made, and then an opportunity to have another go. And all of our questions operate with multiple tries, so that people get different feedback depending on what their answer is, and then they can have another go, and sometimes they can go in and try the whole question again, or try the whole quiz again. And since 2000, I've been involved in the development of new question types. And the one that I'm showing top left there is the what's now the pattern match question type within Moodle, where we actually, rather than asking something as a multiple choice question, which there's quite a lot of negative literature around the use of multiple choice questions, though it can be effective. I'll come back to that in a minute. We're asking people to write a sentence, so again it becomes more authentic, and then we're giving specific feedback. So in the example there, the force, the correct answer is that the force will decrease by a factor of 4. We know that a very common incorrect answer is to say that it'll halve. So rather than just saying you're wrong, we're saying you're wrong and how they're wrong. And again, students find it very useful. The question type I'm showing bottom right is one that I can't take any credit for whatsoever. It's the stack question type, which was developed by Chris Sanguin, who's now at the University of Edinburgh. And it's a question type that's based around it's based on a computer algebra system, so that rather than us having to be clever and second guess what answers people are giving, it is actually using computer algebra behind the scenes to assess mathematical answers, and it is incredibly powerful. I just love writing stack questions, and I would encourage anybody that's working in that sort of area that doesn't know stack to find out about it rapidly. However, so we have, in association with partners like Chris, we at the Open University have really pushed the boundary in terms of what is included in this sort of assessment. But the sort of assessment that I'm talking about remains computer art assessment, which of course is only one small corner of the world that is now technology enhanced assessment. And just to reflect on that, I want to just highlight two other things that came up at this year's conference. So there are two other presentations I just want to show you, not a lot of. I'm very grateful to the presenters for giving me access to their slides, and I hope that I do them justice in describing them. The first presentation I just want to talk about very briefly was from Louise Bello at TU Dublin. Unfortunately, Louise wasn't available for the original webinar, which is why she wasn't speaking at it. But she spoke about the LEAF project at TU Dublin, which was basically looking at several interventions that might make a difference. And that's a screenshot from her presentation talking about the LEAF project. And what really blew me away was the honesty of the evaluation. So this particular intervention she was talking about, and again, just to get your ideas going about what else we might include in technology enhanced assessment, she was talking about giving feedback by audio or video. And this is the positive feedback, the stuff where people were saying we want this, which of course is the general finding that we get from our students when we use audio or video in giving feedback. But of course there are some concerns. She also identified the issues, the concerns that we sometimes get from lecturers in terms of the time commitment and the need to use technology. So that was one presentation. The other presentation, which I actually didn't include purely because the Assessment in Higher Education conference is a truly international conference. We really do have delegates from across the world. But because we're presenting from the UK, I tend to pick presenters from Europe, and Melissa and Victoria are from Australia, so we didn't include that particular presentation, but it's nevertheless, it was a fantastic presentation. And the things I want to emphasize in this presentation is that it was given by Melissa, who is an educational developer, working alongside Victoria, who is a sessional lecturer. And it was that interaction of the two of them working together that gave it its power. And what they were talking about, again, was a series of interventions to improve learning that had been written using H5P, which I don't know if you know. It's a free and open source content collaborative framework based on JavaScript. And it makes it, the aim is to make it easy for everyone to create content for use. And the examples that they gave us were in the context of one particular, I've overclicked now, were in the context of one particular module, and it was the module that Melissa actually teaches. It was the MK, I think it was the MK T100 there, which is, oh no it wasn't, it was MGT 101, which is managing people in organizations. And they very much targeted where there were modules that had problems and worked with the subject lead to make things better. And just three examples of the things they did for that particular module. They created exemplars so that essentially students could see what is good practice. They also, I talked a minute ago about not being the world's greatest fan of multiple choice questions. However, when used creatively, there's been quite a lot written about how very, very simple question types can just give that immediate spark and get you thinking. And that's exactly what they found with these tutorial quizzes, because they were able to give instantaneous feedback. And an example that I'd like to give from that is their use of, they wrote a little module to help students identify for themselves what's meant by plagiarism, because I know very often I find that our students just don't understand what it is that we mean. And the takeaway messages from that presentation were basically get buy-in from academics. It's not something that educational developers can or should be doing in isolation. Work on quick wins, provide support for the work for the academics, and ensure that you basically have an interactive design with a good communication strategy. And again, it's been very successful. They're currently rolling it out to a wider range of academics. That's two specific presentations from the conference. I'd just like to, there's a slide here which literally has the titles of some of the other presentations from the conference. And remember that I'm thinking here about what do we mean by technology enhanced assessment? What might it include? Just to give you some ideas here. So the top talk there, using technology to provide feedback to large classes, that's about the use of in-class quizzes and a two-stage online test. The second one down, the talking about implementing digital assessment at Brunel University, that's actually about bring your own devices for digital exams. The third one down is about peer review. We've touched on that. We've touched on how powerful it can be when students are actually working together, but that's about the peer review of blogs. So using peer review electronically, but also using blogs. I think you can scroll down the others for yourself. You can look at what the things are. There's mention on the third from the bottom there of PeerWise. PeerWise is another tool that if you're not familiar, and I know there's been webinars on it, PeerWise is a tool whereby students write assessment. So it's a very definitely it's peer assessment, but students are learning to write the assessment for themselves. So there's a whole range of things there that might call themselves technology enhanced assessment. I'm just going to pause for a couple of seconds just to give you a chance to think about what we mean by technology enhanced assessment. And obviously, if you want to think about it longer for yourself, pause the slide and wait for longer. But just think about how broad technology enhanced assessment is. And then moving on from that, essentially, what do you think works? What works? What are we doing that's good? And what maybe ought we to be careful about? So I'm not going to force anybody to, to sit and listen to silence. So I'm going to move on. And again, that was my final question. In the original webinar, we had a really, really good conversation, and I was blown away by how much more mature the conversation around these things is than it was certainly 20 years ago, than it was 10 years ago, than it was 5 years ago. And again, we talked about the fact that we are all using technology in our assessment and feedback practice now. That's a given. We need to, because it's everywhere, because it aligns with our teaching, because we have large student numbers, as Maria Rosaria talked about. And I'm just going to end by doing my own little reflection in what I think we need to do if we're going to make technology enhancement of assessment effective. And I actually think we need the most powerful thing is, as far as we're able to, is to keep the experience authentic. Mira, I was really blown away by the fact that you talked quite a lot about what authenticity is. and that conversation that we then had around making assessment sustainable. So it's trying to do things that aren't the sort of things that I did really early on, which are very much me as teacher assessing you as students. They're engaging our students in an authentic way. Though it's also the case that very, very simple computer mark questions can also be powerful in driving learning. I also think that we need to just always be wary. It can be very, very tempting to use technology because we've got the technology tools and we want to use the tools. I think it's important that we always keep in mind that we don't use technology for the sake of doing so. We actually do it for the sake of learning. I then actually think that technology has a huge potential to save staff time. It can provide instantaneous feedback, which gives people that learning experience, and overall I think it can improve the student experience. That's the end of the re-recording of the webinar. Before I hand back to Matthew, I just want to do two things. The first thing is I want to flag that the next Assessment in Higher Education conference, so we have a biennial conference and then we have the in-between years we have a one-day conference, and that next conference is in July, I think it's July the 1st, 2020 in Manchester. If anybody wants to join that physically, I believe that the call for papers is going out in October, so do keep your eyes open for that. And hopefully we'll be back here in around about a year's time with another webinar of the highlights from the presentation. It's the first thing I wanted to do. The second thing is I wanted to thank three people specifically. As you'll have realised, this is a re-recording of the original webinar because of the technical difficulties that we had. I want to thank Mira, who battled real difficult technical issues first time round and has gone to a lot of trouble in getting her presentation in form that we can use today. Similarly, Maria Rosaria, making herself available. Presentation has interestingly, as we've recorded these things, I think we've all grown through the process. And most of all, Matthew, I want to thank you because it's been a bit of a nightmare, but we've got there in the end, and thank you very much indeed.
You're most welcome, Sally. And thank you for Mira and Maria. Thank you very much for, coming back again to do it again. This will be your third time presenting it, once at the conference, once at the original webinar, and again at the re-recording. I don't know if I should mention it, but I really want to say thanks to Sally for all of her leadership to date. You are going to be sorely missed from, I'm sure, the assessment and higher education community. And I don't know if it's supposed to be official, but I really want to say thank you for your efforts.
For pressure of other work, I'm actually stepping down from the role. Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, yes, the webinar is over. We'll be back again next year for another higher assessment and higher education conference, but of course there'll be always the monthly webinar series. So thank you very much all, and I'm going to shut down the recording. I should just mention also that the slides, the original slides for these sessions will be up. So recordings and the chat log for the original session and all of the hypertext links that you will find you saw in the slides, particularly in Mia's slides, will be accessible that way as well. So thank you very much all, and good night or good morning.